We did it! We did it! Can't lift my arms or my legs.
How do you feel?
Feel good, actually. I'm very thirsty. It got really hot at the end, and they don't have water for so long once you cross the finish line. Everybody was like, when are they gonna give us water? But we did it. It's a pretty sweet medal. And I got this lady on the back. Bow, 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 bow. Cheers, y'all. It's Ryan, aka I Run on Beer, back from Berlin, here to celebrate the marathon finish. I've got the medal, I've got the race t-shirt. I am so excited with how that marathon turned out. But for those of you who watched kind of that last video I put out before the marathon itself, there was some definite hesitation headed into the race just because this was the least prepared I felt going into a marathon, just in terms of sheer training volume. Did not get in nearly the volume of mileage that I had hoped before the race, but I will say I was going in with a level of confidence I haven't had in the past, just because of the number of marathons I've done at this point. I am a lot more familiar with the distance than I used to be, not to mention the ultra marathons I've done as well. So had some confidence going in, just being able to rely on past experience. But I will talk about, I think, the key parts of training that allowed me to be as successful as I was throughout that race. But to kick off the video, I'll just kind of give a rundown of the trip, what went well, what didn't go so well, kind of key moments throughout marathon weekend. Of course, focusing on the marathon itself, what was the specific strategy going in and how did that pan out throughout the course? And then at the very end, like I said, I'll touch on kind of those key aspects of training that I think really lended themselves to the success that I found on race day. But I was able to successfully complete the marathon. I finished in 3:50:01. Yes, that 1 second will certainly haunt me, but that was right in the middle of the pack in terms of marathon finishes. This was my 5th marathon, and it is my 3rd fastest marathon and my 3rd slowest marathon. It's right in the middle of my previous marathon finishes. I went in hoping to just get under 4 hours. I ran substantially faster than that, so I'm considering this a huge success. Learned a lot from the race that I'll carry over into the next one, and I'm just so can't emphasize enough how excited I am with that finish line. So that being said, let's touch on the trip itself, just a brief overview of the weekend. My wife and I actually flew into Prague on Wednesday night into Thursday morning, so we landed in Prague Thursday, and I think that is the perfect amount of lead time preparing for the race, just in terms of acclimating and dealing with jet lag. We certainly experienced some pretty severe jet lag symptoms leading up to the race. Thursday was basically a wash of just exhaustion and delirium. Slept about 12 hours Thursday into Friday. Trying to drag ourselves out of bed on Friday was an extreme challenge. Saturday morning, sleeping Friday night into Saturday morning, was the first day. Felt somewhat normal, a little bit groggy, but actually it didn't feel painful getting out of bed in the morning, which was nice because then I felt like I had the full day Saturday feeling like a normal, adjusted human being. So I had the 1 day in between the buffer zone before Sunday. So I knew confidently going into Sunday, okay, I'm adjusted, I'll be good to go marathon morning. So some key things that we did on Saturday. Actually started the day with a Tracksmith Shakeout run that was a blast. I was very excited about that event. It was a little overwhelming or chaotic. It was a pretty small pop-up shop. I want to say probably at least like somewhere between 100 and 200 people showed up for the Shakeout run. So winding through those small streets, and especially trying to maneuver those street crossings was a little bit of a challenge, but a great Shakeout run. Nice to meet some other runners. Had a great time, and the perfect way to just kind of ease into the idea of running the marathon the next day, loosen up all of those muscles that had stiffened through the jet lag and all of the travel by plane, by train, by automobile. And so it was nice to have that Shakeout run serving its exact purpose, just to shake out all that stiffness, prepare for the day. That was over nice and early. I think the run was at like 8 o'clock in the morning. So after that, went back, carb-loaded breakfast. Then it was time to attend the Expo. The Expo for the Berlin Marathon is held in an old abandoned airport, which was pretty cool. Very large in terms of scope of the Expo and in just the amount of walking that you have to do to get to all of the different areas. But you go in, you have to get all of your items checked, your ID, etc. They melt like a bracelet, seal it onto your wrist to get you into the starting corral, so you don't have to worry about checking anything when you get to the start, because you have that bracelet to show you've already been checked. But got the bib, got the marathon jacket, of course, have to get the finisher's jacket, and then very quickly tried to get everything that we needed, head back to our hotel for the night. Our real goal for Saturday was to get everything that we needed to do, Expo, Shakeout run, all that stuff done as early as possible so that we could spend the rest of the afternoon, relaxing, organizing for Sunday, setting everything out for the marathon, making sure the morning routine was set, alarms were set, the flat runner picture was taken care of, just all of those little pre-race details, soothing the mind, making sure you've gone over everything in your to-do list, again, to eliminate as much anxiety as possible before the race. And then the last thing, of course, Saturday night was the carb-loaded dinner. Found a nice Italian spot to go grab dinner. Accidentally ordered myself a bottle of wine when I thought I was ordering a much smaller quantity, so a huge shout out to my wife, who took one for the team and basically finished her beer and then finished the majority of that bottle of wine, so I wasn't in rough shape heading into marathon morning. But very quickly finished dinner, headed back to the hotel, got plenty of sleep Saturday night into Sunday morning. And I did like that the race start was early, but not too early. It was 9:15, so wasn't having to get up at the crack of dawn. Got to wake up at a reasonable time and take my time getting ready in the morning. We were only about a kilometer from the starting line, so got to take my time and relax through my morning process. The only real hiccup on race day was getting to the starting line. I probably could have left myself a little bit more time. Again, I think I underestimated how long it would take to walk to the starting corral. With how meticulously organized the rest of the event was, I just pictured it being very seamless, and for the most part it was, but it was a lot of winding around, finding the specific gate that I could enter into to get access to the starting area, finding somewhere to run my warm-up mile, stripping off the excess clothing to get ready for the race, and eventually winding myself around to the starting corrals. And it was really the walk from the entrance to the runners area to the actual starting corrals was quite a bit farther than I was expecting. So was a little bit stressed getting to the start, but luckily there was a slight delay at the starting line anyway, so no harm, no foul, everything worked out just fine. Now getting into the race itself, basically what my goal was to break the race into 10-kilometer segments and sort of check in with myself every 10K to slowly speed up. I prefer to run all of my races with a negative split in mind, so that was again the goal here. Although I expected that negative split to not be nearly as drastic as previous races. In terms of fueling, I was gonna stop at every water station to grab water. I decided to carry all of my gels with me. I hadn't had an opportunity to test the gels that were gonna be on course, so I opted to just carry everything, and I took a gel every 45 minutes. Again, very meticulously watching that watch and making sure I was taking in a gel every 45 minutes on the dot. So plenty of water, plenty of gels. The only thing left to do was execute. So I pulled up the workout just so I could confirm my splits. I manually did the splits on my watch every time we crossed one of those thresholds on the course. I will admit I messed up the first one. Already I was suffering from runner's brain when we crossed, I think it was the 6-kilometer mark. I was like, oh, 6K, thinking 6 miles is 10K, and I lapped it at the 6K mark. And so did mess up on that first one, but for the first 3.76 miles or 6 kilometers, was running at an 8:56, so just under that 9-minute mile. Perfect. The remainder of that first 10K brought it even down a little bit further to 8:52. So we'll just call that like an 8:55 average for the first 10K. Right in line with what I was hoping for. Moving into the next, I was feeling very good. Again, this is where the confidence really started to build just because of how good I was feeling. Most of my training runs recently had been very slow and controlled, so I wasn't sure. And by slow and controlled, I'm talking about like a 10.5 minute mile, especially on long runs. So just wasn't sure how my legs were gonna hold up at a faster pace, but so far so good. Second 10K, dropped that down to 8:47. Again, still feeling very good. No lingering soreness, no anything starting to creep up. Of course, you're aware of the fact that you're running, but I was trying to stave off any significant muscular fatigue as long as possible, and these paces were feeling significantly better than I was anticipating. So 8:47 for that next 10K, 20K to 30K, only dropped down to 8:46. And this is where I made my biggest mistake at New York City, where at the halfway point, I was like, I'm feeling great. And I turned on the jets, and then I crashed at like 23 miles. And so I was feeling good, but was very aware of, yes, I'm feeling good now, but there is still a lot of race left to run. So decided to just maintain where I was at. So 8:46 from 20K to 30K. Moving past that, this is when we're getting into the 5K segment. So from 30K to 35K, drop down to 8:31. Again, this is where I'm feeling really good. The soreness is certainly starting to creep up, particularly in my hamstrings, but definitely manageable. And I know how much race is left to run. I've run that distance plenty of times. I know how my legs should or are feeling at this point and how much gas I have in the tank. That's the confidence from the past experience I was talking about. So I knew I could push a little bit harder. So from 30 to 35K, ran at 8:31, feeling great about that, still feeling like I had more gas in the tank. After that, from 35 to 40 kilometer mark, dropped it down to 8:20. Again, still feeling really strong. Definitely aware of the increased stress on my body, extending the stride, picking up the cadence. But again, it is manageable soreness, and I'm feeling strong and very accomplished. So although it was hurting, certainly, for sure felt manageable. And again, the race, we're almost there at this point. So I'm just pushing with what I have left in the tank. And then that final 2K dropped it down sub 8 to a 7:46. I will say, for this, it was a lot of visualization. At this pace, mentally, I was struggling a lot more. The miles or kilometers felt substantially longer at this point. Everything just felt like it was taking more time. So this is where you turn to those mental tricks. The one that has worked for me time and time again, as silly as it sounds, is just picking someone maybe 20 or 30 yards in front of you, visualizing that there's a fishing line attached to your waist and attached to their back, and it's basically just slowly reeling you in until you pass them, and then you pick the next person and slowly reel yourself in. Again, it sounds so silly, but it is impossible to overstate how effective that was for me and how much easier the pace felt when I was just focusing on that visualization, and also how much more quickly those last few miles went by. Because instead of focusing on the distance, focusing on how long I had left, I was just focusing on one runner after another, slowly pulling myself towards the finish line. Really, really helped, again, just to take my mind off of the soreness I was experiencing, but I would say more importantly, take my mind off of how much longer I had left, and really just help to pass the time as I got to the finish line. The only piece that went wrong is I had convinced myself that the Brandenburg Gates were the finish line. Hadn't done any research. You just see it in all of the pictures. So when I saw that, I had been visualizing that for months in training, and knowing as soon as I saw that with the roar of the crowd on both sides, I was just going to turn on the jets and gun it towards the finish line. And that's exactly what I did, only to find out that that is not in fact the finish line. You still have about 200 meters left once you cross through the gate. So that final 200 meters was unbelievably painful because I thought I had given everything I had just to get to the gate. That was a mistake on my part. Felt really dumb for that, but just summoned any energy stores I had left to continue to push through and cross that finish line. And it felt just as incredible as I was expecting the second time, and being able to cross the finish line, having had so much success, and really what I feel was executing flawlessly the plan that I had gone in with, sticking to exactly the paces that I had in mind, doing the check-ins exactly as I thought, holding myself back when I needed to. That's something I have struggled with a lot, especially at the marathon, and being able to effectively turn on the gas for that final 10K, for that last official race portion of the marathon. Unbelievably excited with those results. Like I said, 3:50:01. Do I wish I could have broken 3:50? Of course, but that seems to be par for the course for my finish times. Brutal to have just that little bit of extra change, but you know, that just means there's room for improvement in the future. But in terms of what was very effective during this race, a few things during training that I think were key to my success. One, I talked about it already, but just the experience that comes with having run this distance before. I don't think I can say enough about how helpful that was to have in my back pocket. Just the awareness of how I was feeling at different parts of the race and knowing myself well enough to know how much gas I had, how much I could increase my pace without risking a crash later in the race. And that's one of the things that I just think went so well. Again, that's hard to replicate in training. It just comes with practice and experience in the distance, but a huge benefit for me. The second thing that I will touch on is I also don't think I can overstate, in my opinion, how smart of a decision it was for me to dial my training back when things started to go wrong or when I started to feel like I was risking an injury. In the past, again, I think part of this comes with experience, but in the past, I likely would have pushed myself probably beyond my physical limits and risked a more long-term injury that might have prevented me from finding success in the marathon. Sure, I probably could have muscled through the race, but in what condition would I be when I crossed the finish line? Or even worse case, what if I had injured myself worse in training and didn't even make it to the starting line? So I do want to count that because I think it's such an important element of my training. Was when I had that initial injury that was kind of nagging, a little bit of a knee injury early on in training, having the foresight to dial it back and just worrying about doing what I could, prioritizing healthy training over trying to reach this goal that I had initially set for myself. And the third and final thing that I think was key, especially in just how my legs held up, and especially because I had only run 15 miles in training before tackling the marathon. So once I hit that 15-mile mark, still had 11 miles left to go. But I think one of the reasons I was able to persevere through that, and I think especially my legs were able to feel so good through those final 11 miles, was that I incorporated substantially more strength training into my marathon training regimen. And not just willy-nilly training or cool down strength work like I had done before, but dedicated gym days focused on heavy weightlifting. And what I mean by heavyweight is just focusing on low reps, higher weight core muscle groups, squats, lunges, deadlifts, all of those core lower body elements, but then also upper body as well, lat pull downs, rows, tricep dips, etc., making sure that my muscles were well prepared for the race. And I think that helped stave off the muscular fatigue and that soreness that starts to set in these longer distance endurance races. Having the muscles that could continue to run strong with good posture, good form, support that stride through longer distances. I think the weight training, I owe a lot of my success in this marathon to the weight training. So that is certainly something that I hope to continue in the future. But I think I've been babbling on long enough. If you have questions about the race, about the strategy, about my plans from here, please drop those in the comments below. If you made it through the entire video, I hope you'll at least give it a thumbs up. But if you really love it and you don't already, I hope you will subscribe to the channel. There will be plenty more to come in terms of where do I go from here. But until then, I hope your training is going as well as mine did leading up to the race. And until next time, I'll see you around. Cheers.